The annual pace of inflation cooled in February as it posted its largest deceleration since April 2020. Statistics Canada says its consumer price index in February was up 5.2% compared with a year earlier. The reading compared with an annual inflation rate of 5.9% in January, and it was the lowest reading since January 2022 when it was at 5.1%. StatsCan noted that the decline was due to a steep monthly increase in prices in February 2022. Despite the overall cooling, grocery prices remain elevated and outpaced overall inflation. Prices for food purchased from stores in February were up 10.6% compared with a year ago. Now, this is the seventh consecutive month of double-digit increases. Joining us now to unpack all of this is Dr. Moshe Lander, economist and professor at Concordia University. Dr. Lander, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hello.
So, what is the overall takeaway from the February inflation reading?
Well, it's pointing in the right direction. When the Bank of Canada started moving last year to increase interest rates, they said that this is to bring inflation down to that 1 to 3% that we've been used to over the last 30 years. And they seem to be delivering on their promises. Economists were expecting about 5.4%. So 5.2 is a success story. It's even lower than what we thought it was going to be.
Success story indeed. Now, this is the lowest reading since January 2022. What would you say are the factors behind this overall decline?
Well, Nima, not last time that we were talking about inflation, we were talking about it coming from three sources: food, which you already cited, but the other two were gas and rent. And in this month's figures, we actually see that gas and rent prices have moderated. Gas, in fact, was even falling in price. So this is again a good sign that maybe we're returning a little bit to normal. And so that downward pressure in gas and in rent is probably helping keep that anchored below what we would have expected.
Other than gas and rent, we did mention grocery prices were elevated. Prices were up 10.6% from a year ago. So, why are grocery prices continuing to not be affected by this decrease in inflation?
It's still one of those supply chain disruptions. So whenever we talk about Ukraine, from a food standpoint, we say that it's the breadbasket of Europe. And when Ukraine is having a difficult time getting its grain out to European countries, it's not that Europeans are going without bread, it's that they're getting that grain somewhere else. And because they need to get it somewhere else, they now become consumer competitors with, say, Canadians and any other country that is needing grain. And so in Canada, we don't just use grain for making bread, we use it as part of a feedstock in a very long supply chain. And so when that's disrupted, that's putting upward pressure not just on the final product like bread, but also on all of the input prices. And that's why we're seeing things like chicken are so expensive too.
Meanwhile, a lot of turmoil in the banking sector. Three U.S. banks have collapsed. We also know Credit Suisse was absorbed by UBS in Switzerland. So, has inflation been a factor in the turmoil and instability that we've recently been seeing in the banking sector?
Somewhat, but only indirectly. The high inflation has led to this rapid increase in interest rates around the world. And so, if you think about it from a banking standpoint, their biggest asset are the loans that they make. And if those loans go sour, then their asset value loses, wiping out a lot of equity in the process. And so, what we're seeing then is that because those interest rates rose so quickly, especially in things like the tech sector, where they are very, very high risk, high reward, that rapid increase in interest rates has made that risk just too much. And as they default on those loans, it's taking the banking sector down with it. So it's not inflation per se, it's the interest rate response to the inflation.
All right, and we know the Canadian government, as it continues its fight against inflation, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland said that targeted inflation relief will be included in the upcoming 2023 federal budget. So, what should we look out for from this upcoming budget that's set for March 28th?
Very targeted spending. That's code for basically we don't want to do anything, and they shouldn't be doing anything. Inflation is coming down on its own. So if we only have about 6 months left before inflation returns to its normal level, the government what doesn't want to commit to huge spending plans that are going to cost it in the long run to merely alleviate something that the Bank of Canada has already put in process. So I think we're going to see that for low-income Canadians in particular, there might be a few goodies here and there, but it's not going to be some sort of budget-breaking exercise.
All right, Dr. Lander, just about 30 seconds left here, but anything you're watching for next when it comes to inflation?
I want to see the next set of GDP numbers, the next set of unemployment numbers, and to see if there's that resilience that we keep hearing every month in the Canadian economy. The economy is resilient, and that means that there's room for the Bank of Canada to finish the job if what they've already done doesn't do it.
Lots to keep our eyes on. Again, Dr. Moshe Lander, thank you again for your time today on Forum Daily.
Anytime.